Yeah, yours is solid steel. It don't
Built like it was the good old days.
Now, play from start. Nope, you did that wrong too.
I got steel one.
I thought we do.
I thought I was just
Set up. Side show.
Yeah, there's spring. I used to went for a lot brighter.
I'm still, I'm gonna call you when they work.
All right.
I'm singing around.
All right, go ahead and get started. All right, this whole class, the next 3 months, however it is that we're going to be in here together, we're going to focus in on the subject of love. That's what we're focusing on in here. And how that subject affects kind of everything. We're going to talk about things, and this is kind of more of an introductory class just to kind of show you where we're going to head. Because we're going to talk about a whole lot of things. We're going to talk about relationships. We're going to talk about sexuality. We're going to talk about all of these different things, the blessings that come from love, the frustrations that we cause, and the problems that we cause. Because we're human, right? We are imperfect. And we frustrate the blessings of God. And man has always done that. Mankind has always done that ever since the beginning. But we're going to talk about all of these things in a larger context. I want us to get a much bigger picture of love itself. And when we think about that word, love, there's just tons of confusion. Tons of confusion about what love is, what love consists of. And it's not just in the world and in society and culture where that confusion lies. It's also it's also in us. What is love? What is love all about? What does it mean to be someone who loves and who loves well? So
Is anybody else thinking, I want to know what love is? I want you to show me.
I had a buddy write a book one time. It was on love. But he every title chapter was an Aerosmith song.
Oh, yeah?
It is the funniest thing. But there's disagreement. We could go around, what is love? And everybody, maybe you give the scholarly answer, whatever that is, or maybe you would give an opinion, or what you've heard, or what you grew up, what your parents taught you. But we would have all kinds of different definitions of what love is. And to think about how important love is to us, just think about our entertainment. Every story, every book we read, movie we see, TV show, what does it revolve around? Something about love, right? Whether it's getting love or finding love or healing from the hurt and pain of losing love, whatever it is. I mean, that's what all of our entertainment is even focused on. And when we think about it, we kind of get that, don't we? We kind of understand that. Because we can look back at our own lives and our own experiences with love. And it's not necessarily good, is it? And here's what I mean. I mean, just think of the pain that we experience. Just think of the pain that we experience when we think about love. We may have experience with parents in childhood. In fact, there's a lot of childhood trauma out there that comes from our parental figures not necessarily loving as we think they should have. Or maybe there's abusive situations, physical, emotional, verbal abuse. That happens. And that shapes how we think about love. In fact, it's interesting reading biographies. When I've gotten old, Keith, I've gotten into biographies. But famous
Yeah, I ain't
people.
got there yet.
Famous people and not just actors and stuff like that, but even historical figures. A lot of times, people who gain a lot of power, one of their motivating factors is a lack of love from their parents. And they're trying to prove something to them. They're driven by that, and so that affects us. That affects us. Why didn't this change? Well, okay.
So it's not just the people upstairs, huh?
I don't guess so. Wow. All right. Nevertheless, and we may also think about our past experiences with love. Maybe there was a time where we loved someone who didn't love us back, or maybe we lose someone we love. Maybe it's a breakup. Maybe it's divorce. Maybe it's death. But we experience those things, and it causes pain, and this is the pain we experience with love. Maybe we've been hurt somebody who claimed to love us. Maybe there's a betrayal, and maybe there was some kind of lying involved, and so all of these things tend to affect us. It affects us because when we love someone, we're opening ourselves up to them. And that makes us vulnerable. Right? Makes us vulnerable. And so we're making ourselves vulnerable to someone else. And when we get right down to it, so much of what it means to be human, so much, we have that basic need to be loved, but also to give love. And so that tends to be at the very core of every single one of us. We want to not just receive love, but to give love. We want to be loved by other people. We want to love other people. But we have to kind of stop and again define what we're talking about when we say that. What does it mean to love? What does it mean when someone says, I love you? What do they mean by that? What do we mean when we tell someone else, I love you? And why is it that we're hurt so many times by people who say they love us? And at the same time, why is it that we hurt the ones we say, I love you too? Not T-O, not T-O-O. I just realized that could have been confusing. Okay. I'm jet lagged, guys. I am ready for bed right now.
I love both of y'all. You too. I love you too.
You too, like Bono, you too,
You
or
too.
you also? Okay, never mind. Anyway.
Both
Okay. And so this is kind of where we're going in here, because really at the very heart of it, there is something at the very core of all of that that's broken. And again, when we think of the times and the pain that we experience that is associated with love, we kind of understand that, right? We kind of understand that. Because not only have we been wounded, we've wounded others. And so I think the best thing to do is to first approach this subject with humility. And just to make the admission, I don't know how to be loved like I should. And I don't know how to love other people like I should. And even though that's what we want more than anything in the world, to be loved, to give love, if we're really honest, we really don't know how. Don't know how to do that. And what can help with that? What can help with that? I saw a billboard years ago, and I always just kind of thought it was kind of trite, to be honest with you. But it was this billboard that said, Jesus is the answer to all of your problems. And on the surface, that's right? I mean, we can all agree with that. But at the same time, for whatever reason, I found it just kind of trite to say, well, Jesus is the answer to all your problems. Okay, that's true, but how? In what way Is Jesus the answer to all of our problems? And what problems exactly do I have that Jesus is the answer to? How can Jesus solve this problem of figuring out what love is, and what does it mean to be loved and to love other people? Okay. So let's start where we always need to start. And the next few weeks are going to be foundational. We're going to be dealing with doctrinal issues. Because that has to be where everything is rooted into. That makes sense, right? So let's turn to Romans chapter 1. Romans chapter 1. We're going to begin in verse 18. And this passage is so interesting to me because Paul is answering that question. Why Jesus is the answer and why everyone needs Jesus. I mean, that's the whole book of Romans. The Jews, they need Jesus. The Gentiles, they need Jesus. And Paul actually begins with the Gentile people. And he's giving the reasons why they need Jesus. And as we go through the text, I want to say something. I actually say this quite a lot. I want us to make sure that we're not talking about them, that we're talking about us. Okay? Too many times we approach Scripture, especially these topical type of classes, and we think, well, they do that, and they sure do that, and maybe we'll even have a picture in our mind of someone. We need to be thinking about us. Anytime we approach the Scriptures in this way, we need to be talking about us and our disordered loves. The way our love is broken. And again, when I say love, I'm not just talking about our personal relationships, but our relationships with everyone. Not just the sexual relationships, but all of our relationships to one degree or another. And again, we're going to focus a lot in regard to romantic relationships. But again, we're not talking about them. We're talking about us. Because that's where the conversation has to begin. It has to begin with me. It has to begin with us. Recognizing I need Jesus. And what does Jesus have to offer? And so Paul begins by explaining to the church there at Rome why everyone needs Jesus. Both the Gentile people need Jesus. The Jewish people need Jesus. Begins with the Gentiles. Here's what he says, verse 18, Romans chapter 1. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. Okay, so Paul's right there. We could spend a whole lot of time just in that one verse. There's a lot here. But let's start off with that word ungodliness. We think of ungodliness. Ungodliness is the opposite of what?
Godliness.
Godliness, right? Very, very kind of clear, straightforward. And when we talk about godliness, we're talking about a life that is directed towards God. A life that is directed towards God. A life that fears God, is humble before God, who is pious, who worships God. And so Paul says that God's wrath is revealed against all ungodliness. So the opposite of that. All of life that doesn't revere God, that doesn't fear God or worship God. Peoples whose lives are oriented against God. They don't fear Him, they don't honor Him, they don't worship Him. And to one degree or another, really, at one point in time, all of us kind of fit into that category, right? At one point in time. And so we've all been ungodly and failed to worship or revere and respect Him and love Him like we should. And another word for unrighteousness, in fact, in the Greek, it can be translated both ways. It's the word injustice. Injustice. Because that is what happens when we don't live a life that's oriented toward God. When we don't fear Him, love Him, respect Him, worship Him, obey Him. That is the point where we begin to mistreat other people around us. We mistreat other people that are made in His image as well. And so we end up committing injustice against each other. And so when we don't fear God, love God, adore God, worship God, when we live a life that's not oriented toward God, it becomes inevitable that we will start mistreating people in one way or another. And it's true of all of us. It's true of all of us. And this is why the world needs Jesus, because we were ungodly. We were unrighteous. We were committing injustices against one another. And Paul says that the God's wrath is revealed against this. Now, in our modern times, we don't necessarily like to talk about God's wrath. Anybody love to talk about God's wrath? You just want to sign up for that God's wrath class? No, it's not popular in our times. In fact, we don't like to think about a God that gets angry. You know, we think that's weird because we're supposed to be loving. You're supposed to be a loving God, right? And a God that gets angry. Don't be angry. It just sounds funny to us. But yet, when you think about it, at the same time, what do we tend to say when we see something tragic happen?
That's awful. Okay, go ahead, that's not right.
No, that's fine. I was just thinking.
I can handle it.
No. It's something awful that happened. Let's say school shooting. We sit back and say, well, where was God? Why isn't God angry about that? You know, a tragedy happens, maybe an earthquake. And where was the earthquake? The last one killed a whole bunch of, like 3,000 people. It wasn't here. It was like, I don't know. I thought it was like, anyway. Where? Bangkok. Yeah, I thought it was Thailand. I knew it was one of the Asian areas. But where was God? Why isn't God angry at that? Why can't God get angry at all these injustices that we see? So do you see how we're inconsistent at that? We don't want to talk about God's wrath when it comes to us. We want to talk about loving God and everything. But when we see something, well, why doesn't God take care of that problem? And so we become inconsistent if we're not careful. And so we want God to be angry about some injustices, just not the ones that we're involved in.
It's kind of like this when you see that child that's out misbehaving. Why isn't the parent taking care of this? Where's the parent?
Yeah.
Why is the parent not correcting this? It's the same mentality. Why are they not taking care of this?
Exactly.
We don't say that to your kids.
But what it boils down to is that we want God to be exactly like us. We want God to like what we like and dislike what we dislike. And if God is exactly like us, if he always thinks like us, he gets mad about the things we get mad about, and he loves all the things that we love, then what we've done is created a God in our own imagination. Okay? He's not the God of heaven. Because Paul says here, God gets angry at all unrighteousness, at all injustice, at all failures to orient life around him. Because when a life is not oriented around God, that individual is going to be committing injustices against other people around him. We're not going to love our neighbors like we're supposed to, because we don't fear God like we're supposed to. And when we're not oriented toward God, we end up following our own desires. We end up doing our own thing, if you will. And so God is angry. His wrath is toward all injustices, even the injustices and unrighteousness that we commit, the hearts that we've broken, the lies that we've told, the promises we didn't keep. And so, again, God, we don't want God to be angry when we break someone's heart. But we want him to be angry when our hearts get broken. But look at verse 19. He says, "For what can be known about God is plain to them, the people that disregard God and don't revere God and worship God, Gentile nations. What can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them, for his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse." Okay. God is rightfully angry because he says, you see all of this stuff? The mountains, ocean, the stars, the sun, the moon. You taste the food, the good food. You experience laughter and happiness and joy. And we look at all of these things and we say, that's awesome. And our very next thought is supposed to be, whoever made this and whoever designed this and whoever created this, here's this beautiful picture painted for us in this world. I want to adore Him and love them and live for Him. And I want to be in His presence. I want to do what He wants me to do. All of this beautiful creation, Paul says, should drive us to orient our lives toward God and worship Him and adore Him. But humanity doesn't do that. What do we do with all that? We look at it and say, oh, this is wonderful. I love this good food, and I love these good feelings, and I love these mountains and oceans and laughter and joy and all this stuff. But you know what? I'm going to pretend like it all just happened. Or someone else created and gave this to me. Or I'm not going to think about or adore or love or worship whoever it was who created this. And when people have that attitude, Paul says they're without excuse because they're not giving God the honor that's due to Him. Look at verse 21. For although they knew God, they did not honor Him as God or give thanks to Him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. They did not honor Him or give thanks to Him. So, when we fail to orient our lives around God, when we fail to worship Him, to love Him, to serve Him, when we look at all the beautiful things in the world and we laugh at the funny jokes and we taste the wonderful food and we see the beautiful mountain ranges and the oceans and we don't honor God or give thanks to God, don't orient our lives toward Him, Paul says our thinking and our feeling, our desires, motivations, hearts, mind, they become distorted. They become distorted. And this is what's happened to humanity. Not just to them, but to us. This is what happens to us. This is what happens. And specifically, again, he's talking about the Gentile nations and really, we're the Gentiles, right? This is our forefathers. This is our people, our ancestors. Because we did not worship the one who obviously created all of this, we didn't give Him honor, we didn't give Him thanks. And so we become distorted in our thinking and our feelings. Now, normally, when we listen to this verse, we think about the feelings, right? We can't trust the emotions. Emotions aren't trustworthy. That's what we're always told, right? And so if we don't orient ourselves toward God, then we can't trust our emotions. It's not about how we feel about something. It's about... But notice what he says here. It's not just our feelings, but it's our thinking too. It's our logic. It's our reasoning. It all becomes distorted. Not just our feelings. It's not just about don't follow your heart. Don't follow your mind either. Because it's all distorted. Our thinking becomes futile as well. And Paul would look around at the philosophers of his time. And in fact, he quotes some of them in the book of Acts and in some of the discourses he has there. And we can look at the philosophers of our day and we think, okay, well, they sound reasonable. The conclusions they're trying to draw, the things that they're saying and talking, sounds reasonable. But Paul says because they're not orienting their lives toward God, that it's delusion. It's delusional. Because when we don't begin with God, we will always come out to the wrong conclusion. When we don't begin with God, we will always come to the wrong conclusions. And whatever conclusions we draw based on our feelings, based on our thoughts, based on our reasoning, based on our logics, if we don't begin with God, we don't begin with a fear, adoration, love, we're going to come to the wrong conclusion. And that's true of everybody. It's true of them out there. More importantly, it's true about us as well. Look at verse 22. It says, claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Okay. There is no one on earth that doesn't worship. You ever thought about that? We worship something. We're going to worship something. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's sex. Maybe it's power. In fact, you can draw all of those down. And again, we don't create the little wooden statues and bow down to that or anything like that. But in our world, all of those other things, it tends to be about self. We are in a culture where it is the norm to worship self. We have become our own gods. We've created an idol of ourselves. Whether it's our thoughts or conclusions, reasonings, desires, hopes, whatever it is, we become the ultimate thing. We're the ultimate. So it's my feelings and my thoughts and my conclusions and my wants and my desires and my independence and my autonomy. All of that becomes our ultimate thing. I only want to serve me. I only want to answer to me. I belong only to me. And so that's where we are today. But even before that, every human society has always worshipped something. And Paul says when you worship the creation rather than the Creator, when your lives don't revolve around God, and when you don't adore Him, serve Him, love Him like we should, then our thinking, our feeling, our hearts, our minds, they become distorted. And we see that when we disconnect our love from God as well. Because all of a sudden our moral choices become distorted. And so, even if we take love, and we take this aspect of love, and a lot of times we'll talk about agape love, and how agape is seeking the best for the object of the one who is loved, or seeking maybe the other person's good. But apart from God, we have to ask the question, well, okay, what's good? What's good? What does it mean to seek another person's good? And so everything outside of God all of a sudden becomes subjective, becomes arbitrary. And if we're not careful, it ends up becoming just circular. Just circular. So when we disconnect these things from God, when we serve something other than God, when we make the creation, even ourselves, the object of our worship, everything about us becomes distorted. So look at verse 24. Therefore, God gave them up in the lust of their hearts to impurity. And pay close attention to this phrase. To the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves. Because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worship and serve the creature rather than the Creator who is blessed forever. You know, I used to always think that the secular world put too much emphasis on the human body. But I think the fact of the matter is that we don't emphasize or respect the body enough. Do we understand what the human body is? I think we have the idea sometimes that we're just meat sacks for our spirit to be in, you know? Don't we? Don't we? But the human body in regards to the creation, the human body in Scripture, it's the most sacred physical object of creation. The human body. And it doesn't matter how old or young or big or small or what it's capable of doing or not capable of doing. If it is a living human body, it's a person that was created to bear the image of God. Now, when we talk about that image, this is interesting to me. And I don't know, I'm geeky about words. But the word image in Genesis is the same word translated idol everywhere else. The same exact Hebrew word. In the ancient world, an image bearer of the gods, the little g gods, typically an idol, right? We think maybe about that golden calf, the Egyptians, but the true and living God, Yahweh, didn't want to have images that were made out of wood or stone or metal. He wanted living, breathing images. And every single body we come in contact with, including our own, is sacred because of that. Because that body is an image bearer of the living God. It's sacred. And if we dishonor the one to whom that body points, then we dishonor the image of the one to whom it points. Does that make sense? When we dishonor God, we're dishonoring also the images of God. And when we dishonor the image of God, we dishonor God. Think about our monuments. Whether it's the 9/11 monument in New York, those are the big ones. You go to Washington and you see maybe the Holocaust Museum or the Washington Monument. Let's say you go and you're watching the Lincoln Memorial, right? And there you go, and if you go, you're able to walk at night around there, and it's just gorgeous, all lit up and everything. But then you see someone spray painting the Lincoln Monument. What do you think about that? You want to take them out, right? It makes you angry. Because it's not the statue they're messing with. It's the
image.
It's the historical idea they're messing with. You see, when we dishonor the image, we're dishonoring what the image represents. And so now all of a sudden that becomes a little bit more clear what's happening with us. If we're the image of God and we're dishonoring one another, and that's what we do when our lives aren't oriented around God, then what does that tell us about our respect for God? And vice versa. Vice versa. And so if we deny the one, we're denying the bigger and greater reality. We're dishonoring the one to whom that points. And so let's kind of tie this up. I feel like I'm all over the place, and I apologize. When we fail to love and worship God, that results in dishonoring human bodies that were made to bear His image. And that's what Paul is saying here. Now, we're going to talk a lot next week about bodies and human bodies and what it means to be human. And the idea that our bodies are sacred, and the way that it was created, and everything, including our body's sexuality, everything was created to honor the one who created our bodies, who created us. And you are your body. We are our bodies. We're not just a spirit in a meat suit. And I think sometimes our teaching of the past have given us that kind of image. But you are your body. You are a whole person. Body, spirit. A whole person. And if you're a Christian, on top of that, then your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. And even if you're not a Christian, you're still an image bearer of God. Our bodies are the closest thing to an idol that the living God has made and has authorized. Every human we come into contact with is sacred. They have a special sacred relationship and vocation from God. And when we dishonor God, when we just go about our life and say, well, it's just my body, it's just a bunch of meat, I can do with it what I want to do with it, and you do with your body what you want to, I'm going to do with my body what I want to. Imagine if we were so flippant about our monuments and our special places that we create, and we treat it like a playground. This is why. When we fail to orient our life around God, when we fail to worship Him, love Him, serve Him, honor Him, fear Him, obey Him, that we will inevitably not just dishonor our own bodies, but the bodies of other people. And that's exactly what Paul is talking about here. He goes on, look at this, for this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions, for their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature, and the men likewise gave up natural relations with women, and were consumed with passion for one another, men committing shameless acts with men, and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error. We're going to spend more time with this in weeks to come. But Paul's point here is exactly what we're talking about. That the human body, including the compatibility that he's talking about, sexually speaking, between men and women, it's what the body was created to do. But when we take the body and use the body in a way that's contrary to its created purpose, then we dishonor not just God, but we dishonor the body as well. We dishonor the image. We dishonor the body because we're using it in a way that it wasn't created to be used. And this is the natural result, according to Paul here, when we don't worship and serve God. But it's not just that particular example. And sometimes we put the period there. But here's where it gets very, very personal. Look at verse 28. And since they did not see fit, and again, it's talking about humanity in general, see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind filled with futile thoughts to do what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice.
Say it again.
No. They were full of envy and murder and strife and deceit and maliciousness. They're gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Are you on that list? I am. Multiple times. I'm there. Every single one of us have dishonored our own body and the body of other people. We fail to love that which God created to be His image bearers because we first failed to love Him. And so we do all of these things because we fail to see the creation and give honor to the Creator, to orient our lives toward Him, and instead we worship the creation, and as a result, we said, hey, I love money, and I love power, and the pleasures of life, and really like having a good time, and I just want to make my life all about that stuff. And the result, we mistreat ourselves, and we mistreat one another. Verse 32, Paul says, though they knew God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. Now, how did ungodly people know that those things were wrong? You ever thought about that? I mean, we know they're wrong, but go to an atheist on the street and or maybe even think back to a time where you just didn't care anything about religion or anything like that. You weren't trying to live a good, righteous, religious life. Did you know that lying was wrong?
God created us with a conscience.
Yeah. We knew that, right? Yeah. We know it's wrong. Deceiving other people is a wrong thing to do, right? Absolutely. And if we just found someone didn't believe in God, didn't have any kind of religious ties, and asked them that, do you think lying is wrong? You shouldn't lie to other people. Of course they would agree with that. Most non-sociopathic people would agree with that, right? But here's the next question. Have you ever lied to anybody? You have, right? You have, right? We've had people lie to us. Why do we do this? Paul says it's because we're suppressing the truth. We're suppressing the truth. We knew better. We knew this isn't what my mouth was made to do. It's not what my body was made to do. But we did it anyway. We did it anyway. So suppressing the theological truth that is apparent in the created order, okay, leads to all of those other things Paul is talking about. It leads to debased minds that can't make any kind of moral judgment. It's going to lead to darkened hearts. In other words, our motivations, our desires, our loves are all going to be distorted. And ultimately, it's going to lead to dishonored bodies and then to death. And so again, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about us. And this is why we have to start with Jesus. And this is why we need Jesus. But again, back to our main point. Why do we need Jesus? 1 John 4, very quickly. It's 11:30. I know we've hit the wall here. But look at 1 John 4. Very, very, very quickly. And we'll end with this. Start in verse 7. John says, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from where? Love is from God. And whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love." If you want to love well, if you want to love your spouse, love your neighbor, love your boss, whoever it is, love your own body, your own self. Where do we get that from? It's only one place. It's rooted in God. Verse 9. God is the source of all love. Verse 9, "In this the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent His only Son into the world so that we might live through Him. In this is love, not that we have loved God, because we haven't, but that He loved us and sent His Son to be the propitiation for our sins." See, the love of Jesus teaches us first to love God. And then that is when we can actually begin to love one another. And that's why we don't love well. Because we haven't been fully transformed by the love of Jesus. The love of Jesus transforms us. It changes us. It orients our hearts and minds to love God. And it reorients our whole lives around Him so that we fear Him and obey Him and worship Him and adore Him and surrender to Him. John goes on, he says, "Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God abides in us, and His love is perfected in us." So everyone wants to be loved, wants to show love. We all want that. The people around us, as we leave here, they want that. But the only way to do that is to be transformed. Transformed into people who can do that. And the only way to do that is through the gospel. By becoming followers of Jesus and allowing His love that was manifest at the cross to begin to transform us and sanctify us. Only God's love can teach us how to love and be loved. And that's what we're going to talk about throughout this course. Okay? Any questions or comments? And I'm sorry for going over. I'm sorry for rambling, but hopefully next week I'll be sober-minded. I'm not. I mean, I'm sober, but that came out really wrong. Really wrong there. Any questions or comments before we dismiss?
What was going to be on the screen?
The verses.
The PowerPoint? You have a PowerPoint?
Yeah. It was the verses and then a couple of bullet points.
So if we wanted you to email it to us?
Yeah, I definitely can. Absolutely
We'll
can.
be here next week. We wanted you to email us next week's lesson.
I can do it. And also in Lightpost, I don't know if y'all have been able to get that up and running. I'm going to get some help materials out for that. But in Lightpost, I'm posting the handouts as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know it was like we rolled it out and then I left. And it was just kind of like, But yeah, all the class material will be on Lightpost as well. But yeah, I can email you the PowerPoints. Absolutely.
Maybe we should get some noise reducing.
I know, right?
It's very likely.
I know. All right, let me see if I can cut this thing off without it.
Not much on that.